Hello and welcome to the second episode of our weekly show.
Yep.
My name is Zio.
My name is KickAZ. We're about to put up a Christmas tree.
For this week's episode, we're dedicating to those of you who are crossing the sea from WoW to Final Fantasy XIV. We're going to discuss what it looks like on the other side and will you be accepted when you get there.
So stay tuned, guys.
Alright, so let's get to it. I did a video a little while ago about the differences between Final Fantasy XIV and WoW, and while that was more of just a general comparison of the two games, here I think the best way to really showcase the differences or to go a little more in depth with some of the base systems and how those play out differently. So to start off, we'll go over Transmog and or Glamour, depending on which game you're talking about. Transmog, as it's known as in the World of Warcraft, is basically where you could take armor, weapons that you've gained throughout your time in playing the game, and essentially convert the appearance of your current equipment to that of an older piece. WoW's Transmog options are extensive. It's partially because of how long the game's existed and the frequency in which items drop in the world. WoW does a great job in providing random drops in dungeons, raids, and even in the open world, and a lot of the gear, even the lower quality stuff, looks pretty cool. Some of the most expensive and or unique items that you can use for transmogging in the World of Warcraft are uncommon or rare in quality. There is an abundance of quest rewards that look great as well, and random world drops sometimes look pretty cool too. In contrast to WoW's massive transmog system, Final Fantasy XIV has a smaller collection. Again, it's mostly because the difference in where they're at in their life cycle. WoW's obviously been out a lot longer than Final Fantasy XIV, but it's also because there are no random world drops apart from very specialized scenarios like in deep dungeons and fates, which alongside a couple other scenarios which will never have you saying, holy shit, this random squirrel just dropped some awesome item. With that said, there are a ton of very nice looking crafted armor and weapons, and the armor and weapons that can drop from dungeons or raid bosses or that you can purchase with currency are usually stunning. The addition of dyes also makes a huge difference in how a piece can look and mesh with other pieces that you may not have considered otherwise. It's also worth pointing out, while the overall selection may be smaller, the quality of some of the appearances rivals, and in my opinion sometimes they actually surpass much of what WoW has to offer. Then we get to dungeon. While there's no shortage of dungeons in either game, WoW's lifespan has led to an overwhelming number of options for dungeoneers, and the addition of Mythic Plus and Time Walking have reinvigorated many of the older dungeons and keeps the more current dungeons relevant throughout the life of the expansion. From a design perspective, WoW's dungeons are great, and many of my favorite dungeons of all time are found in Azeroth, though I prefer their original iterations, and I'm talking about Sunken Temple and UBRS specific. Dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV are all well done, and while I don't enjoy running them over and over, or unsynced for the lulls, mostly because limitations on potential loot drops, there are some that I will run for rare drop items and pets. While leveling, there are certain dungeons I tend to spam, trying to get past a certain bracket, but hopefully we'll no longer need to do that once New Game Plus comes out, if it allows us to gain experience on a different class by redoing the story quests. I've said it before on this channel, but I love WoW's raids. Although, to be fair, I generally like them best the next expansion or two after they are new, because I like to solo them for transmog or mounts and pets. I also like to duo them with Estrella, because it's kind of our thing, and we like to do it together when we burn out on leveling our army of alts or farming gold. I've also mentioned on this channel that I'm not a huge fan of Final Fantasy XIV raids. I haven't given them a fair shake. I actually started in Stormblood, so the only raid that I've ever tried was the Deltascape version 1. I was pretty turned off by the fact that it was just a boss fight with no lead up and no ads. I intend to give them a fair shot going forward, though I'm a bit disappointed that there is no way to unsync and do them solo or duo with Estrella. It's a little aggravating that you have to find at least a partial group to go forward and enter. As far as PvP is concerned, I loved PvP in Vanilla WoW, and I enjoyed it in BC and Wrath as well. When I took an extended break that lasted until early Mist of Pandaria, I've really never been able to get back into it. I did play pretty hardcore for a bit to get gladiator gear on my Horde Warlock during Warlords, because I kept getting ganked by a Warlock in Tannin Jungle that had over 600,000 HP, but even then, once I got the gear, I was out. And with that said, I have a brother and a bunch of friends who are still very much into PvP and WoW, and while it may not not be perfect, they tell me that it's the best option they found for a consistently rewarding PvP experience. Unfortunately for Final Fantasy, I do not like their PvP. I've played it and given it a fair shake, but once I got the very first mount reward, I was done. It's not terrible like in some games, but the battle system doesn't really lend itself to fast-paced, highly engaging PvP scenarios. It's definitely more fun when you're with a group that is actually trying to achieve the objectives and win, but that's true with any PvP system, and to me, it's really not as engaging as PvP in other games. When it comes to open world content, questing in WoW is good, and at times it's really great. They've made huge strides on how the story flows and how quests are presented in a meaningful way. There are world quests, of course. I know you're going to miss those. Gathering and pet battles are a big thing as well, because you got to catch them all. But all in all, WoW doesn't really thrive in open world content unless you're very, very into war mode. And most of what you do at endgame is actually done in an instance environment. Final Fantasy XIV is great for open world content. From fates to gathering to the very best questing experience out there, there's a lot to do in the open world. Fates, while not quite as frequently used for power leveling as they were in the past, are varied. Sometimes they even offer unique experiences that provide some great rewards and can be either timed or straight up contingent on other actions having taken place in certain zones to activate them. I mentioned gathering here because the process of learning to gather and actually doing so alongside crafting is a game in its own right. This also leads into housing, which if you're not a gatherer or a crafter, you probably don't own one. But player housing, while instanced in sections, is accessible to anyone who wants to go there, and it does act as a separate plane of open world content. Final Fantasy XIV also features levs, which, not used much at higher levels, are an initial form of outdoor content that most low-level battle classes and crafters and gatherers will use to help level through 50. Now, I say that it's open world. You're technically in the open world, but you're really focused on a specific task that is semi-instanced. Crafters and gatherers, however, do have some beneficial uses for the levs, even past level 50, which is pretty cool. Also, I think it's fair to mention, while it's not really open world content, I really just don't have anywhere else to put it. Each job in Final Fantasy XIV has their own unique quest lines. The frequency and level in which you embark upon them can vary based on which job you're working with, but they're all very interesting, and I honestly feel like they're a valuable part of the experience in connecting with your job. As far as community is concerned, WoW's community is full of good people that are surrounded by very loud and toxic trolls. The community overall is not bad, and I've met some very good friends that I actually have real-life connections with, even as far back as vanilla. Overall, I feel like WoW should be enjoyed most with the general and trade chats turned off and as far away from the forums as possible. Final Fantasy XIV's community, on the other hand, has lent me a completely different experience. Sure, there's going to be trolls and exceedingly odd people in capital cities, but the vast majority of people I encounter are genuinely nice people who are always willing to help, they're willing to teach other people, and play with others nicely. In fact, they even have a mentor system, which if you qualify for it, can lend you some pretty nice rewards just for being a nice person and helping new people out. When Estrella and I first started, we joined a free company, which is a guild, and the free company leader rushed to us at the low-level starting zone and dumped a bunch of pets, gil, and a mount on us as a welcome present. The other members of the free company were our go-to for crafting cool or helpful stuff until Estrella became an omni-crafter, and to this day they are our go-to for running content that we didn't do previously when it was new. I'm not naive enough to believe that this is doctrine on every server and at all times, especially as more and more of the hordes of people fed up with BFA filter in. But as it stands now, Final Fantasy XIV's community is more akin to vanilla WoW's, and I think that's one of the aspects that draws me back every time. When we talk about professions, WoW's professions are shit. They have been for a long time, and unless Blizzard makes a complete overhaul of the system, they will continue to be shit for the foreseeable future. I've spoken about this to some extent already here and in greater detail in previous videos, but a quick overview reveals that Final Fantasy XIV is the place to be if you enjoy crafting and gathering. The items and gear you can make are and stay relevant throughout the expansion and beyond in some cases. Much of the best looking glamour is crafted gear, and it's so in depth that there are people who literally only play the game for the crafting and gathering. Housing is a big deal in Final Fantasy XIV as well, and you're most likely not going to be able to afford a house, much less a medium house or a mansion, if you're not a crafter and or gatherer. Even if you're like me and housing isn't your thing, crafting and gathering is the best way to make gil in the game. While you can play the auction house and make some gil, you're likely to be limited to the kind of gil that I have and believe that 8 to 10 million gil is an amazing feat. Estrella, on the other hand, is an omnicrafter, meaning she does all the skills and has them at max level, and she is regularly sitting on 2 to 500 million gil, and even that is pennies compared to some of the other people who have been doing it far longer. As far as the current state of the game, BFA has not received the love that Legion did, as we all know, and it suffered from some of the choices that the developers made in regards to how they wanted to do things. With that said, I doubt the situation is quite as dire as many of the big boys here on YouTube claim, and even at a fraction of their Legion population, WoW is still the guy to beat in the market. I am personally taking a break until 8.2 when I'll return to grind out flying, but I know a lot of people who aren't. It's worth restating once again, the worst days for the or one of the best MMOs out there is still better than the very best days for a game that's actually just total shit. Final Fantasy XIV is in a great place right now, with an expansion on the horizon, higher account created numbers than ever before, and Blue Mage coming in 4.5. Final Fantasy XIV glows like a new mom who just found out her babysitter would love to stay the night and get up when the baby wakes up for a feeding. Not much in life can make the developers feel better about their jobs than the hype and love players have for their game. It's not all kitty cats in short skirts and sexy dragon women though. There are, as with anything in life, some flies in the shit ready to spread some toxicity. I'll be completely honest, the news about how Blue Mage is being handled was a disappointment to me initially, and I have an entire video about it, so make sure to check it out. However, now that I've seen the potential for how this can be handled, and honestly, until all the fanfests are finished and we have it in our hands, it's not worth speculating about because we could all be very, very wrong. New Game Plus, new classes, new storylines and quests, a world transfer system, a new playable race, and a new way of doing things with the trust system are all exciting things to look forward to. Final Fantasy XIV is alive and well, and it seems to be looking to reinvent how an MMO can be done well by improving all the time. I do and will always love WoW, but Final Fantasy XIV has all of my attention for now, and they've earned it. Alright, well I hope this answered some questions that you may have if you're making the trip over to Final Fantasy XIV, and likewise, if you're at Final Fantasy XIV, I hope maybe this helped you gain some insight into the world of Warcraft, in the event that you ever decided to go that route in the future. As far as the burning question, will you be accepted, that I posed to all the WoW players heading over towards Final Fantasy XIV, the answer is a resounding yes, in my opinion. I've met nothing but nice people, save a couple, and everyone was super helpful as I was learning to play the game. In my opinion, there's not a better place to be right now. Alright, well I hope you assholes enjoyed this. Be sure to comment below if you enjoyed the video, or if you hated it. Punch me in the face with the like button and subscribe. And if you're extra salty that I dared to tread on your feelings on a whim, prove it to everyone and wipe your tears with the dislike button and subscribe anyway so that I can feed on your bitterness next time. I'm Zia with KickAZ Gaming, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.